Welcome back to the homestead. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon out. We're back on the Dodge project. Today's project is to get this turbo in that truck. So you've watched the other videos, you'll know we've already got our new shiny 3-piece PDD diesel exhaust manifold installed. So what we're going to need is we're going to need these 2 bolts, these 4 nuts, and this gasket. We're going to set them over there. Just going to get some stuff up here where we can get to it when we get ready to roll. This should be pretty straightforward. I have gone ahead and cleaned my old gasket off my turbo drain. I'm waiting on a gasket for that, and I'm waiting on an oil feed line, but we'll go ahead and get the turbo hung. We'll get our exhaust hooked back up, and we'll get our elbow put back on that goes to the intercooler. So I'm going to grab the turbo, and we're going to get up here and see what we can do. And I'm not sure if the turbo is clocked correctly. It is all tightened down, so I'm going to assume it's clocked correctly, but what I mean by that is if you look on the exhaust side, there's some bolts, and on the intake side there's some bolts. So all 3 pieces can turn like a clock from each other. So if we hang this on there and the oil feed and stuff like that doesn't line up correctly, which I don't think it's going to, it's pretty easy to clock it. So that hangs down in there like that. And as you can see, our oil feed and stuff, and of course the intake is pointed in completely the wrong spot. So we're going to have to loosen those bolts and clock that. I just want to make sure we can do it in place, and it does look like we can without too much trouble. So I think we'll go ahead, get a gasket in that, and get some nuts on that. And it isn't too heavy. It's heavy enough, but it's not too heavy. Oh, missed one of those. And just like on the exhaust manifold, if you watch that video, you're not going to want to crank each one down hard all at once. You're going to want to, if it starts going hard, you're going to want to kind of work around the square and pull it up. Because everything being cast, you could break something pretty easy if you forced it. Make sure we're not hitting anything, no interferences. They tell you to tighten these to 35 foot-pounds as well. I'm just tightening them basically as tight as I can get them with this wrench. I don't have a way to get in there, and I got a pretty good feeling for what that is. So if you guys come over here with me, I'll get my ladder out of the way so you guys can see what I'm seeing. So when I talked about clocking, these are the bolts I'm talking about loosening. This is the exhaust wheel and this is your intake wheel. So we're going to start by loosening the ones on the exhaust wheel and getting this center core clocked, vertical. So it'll connect to the oil return and connect to the new feed. And then we'll have to rotate this so that piece there is almost straight down. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab a wrench and we're going to show you how to clock this real quick. And you don't have to take them out, you just have to loosen them. I might have to trade places with you guys. I can't quite get to those backside 2 bolts. Okay, so now you see how that turns. So now if you guys come back over here, come around me, you'll see how I'm turning the center section and the intake. And I'm basically just trying to get those, vertical. So when that comes over in there, that will come up and fit in there nice and correct. Something like that right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this back down, snug one up. And I'll snug them all back up, and then we'll turn the intake side of it. I was kind of surprised it wasn't clocked because they market this as a drop-in replacement. Not that people can't figure out how to do this in their backyard on the weekend, but I guess I thought maybe Borg Warner took the time to clock it from the factory. And you'll notice on this turbo, the wastegate runs directly from the turbo. On the stock Dodge turbo that was on here, the wastegate got its vacuum, or not vacuum, it got its pressure from over there on the AFC. But when you hear people say they're going to put a boost elbow on, that goes right in here. And basically what they're doing is they're restricting the amount of air that can go through there so that the wastegate gets tricked into thinking there's less boost than there really is. And that allows you to build a little bit more boost. Not sure where we'll end up with that. We don't need an incredible amount of boost. So we're just going to have to get it going and see how it behaves. The kit is, as a whole, is supposed to be around 400 horsepower, but I know we don't need that. I don't remember exactly. So I could point something like that. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to put our elbow here on and figure out, how the intercooler pipe and everything fits and get it all lined up. This has an O-ring in here that seals it. We've looked that over. It looks good. We're going to go ahead and reuse it. The band clamp looks good, so we'll take the nut off that. And that basically fits up inside the turbo like so. I'm going to guess we've gone too far. Fits up in there like that. And that band clamp goes over the two pieces like that. I don't know if you guys can see that on camera right there, how that goes over both pieces. And then you get that inside there. Like that. Put your nut on. I think it's 11. And we'll get a socket and tighten this up. I just want to get it snug so that we can get the pipe in there and start to see where things go. Let's see it. Let's just still turn it. And this pipe, right here in this pile of parts, which I'm not going to install right now. I'm going to show you how it goes. That goes down there on the intercooler like that. And then this end goes on the turbo. There we go. So that's going to go in there. Something like that, you know, gets turned to what makes sense. But you can see it fits, but we're not going to tighten this half of the turbo down until we put our new boots on, settle on what we're doing for an intercooler, and so on and so forth. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and leave that, and we're going to get our exhaust side together, which is very similar to the intake side. It's another band clamp, and you can see they have that groove in them where the two flanges set in there. As you tighten it, it wedges those flanges right together. I don't know if you guys can see over the top from the other side, or if you can see all right from this side, but there's your two flanges. You kind of just get them lined up. And it's worth noting, we didn't even unhook anything on the exhaust. It pretty much was that easy.
This one time at band clamp,
these are kind of one of those things you probably want to look at too if you're buying a bunch of parts. You know, if this is your daily driver, you don't have anything else to drive, and you're like, hey, I'm going to tear this apart this weekend and do this. You probably want to check your clamps and see how rusted they are. They are stainless, but and just crank it down. And we'll switch to a bigger wrench. This just happened to be the wrench I had that fit it. So that's about it. Other than getting the drain gasket and bolting the drain line back up to the bottom, which just literally bolts in there, and then the feed line, which screws in, we've got a turbo. So I think we'll probably wrap this up. We'll wait for a few parts to come in. We'll maybe do a video where we get the pyrometer hooked up, oil feed and drain hooked up, and by then we'll have figured out what we're doing on our intercooler, and we'll bring you along for that ride. We have to change the oil filter while we're right here, because we're going to change the oil, because once we mess with the timing, we're going to be putting a lot of brake fluid into the oil pan. And we have to clean up our fittings and go get some new hoses. And we'll put this side back together. The heater hoses aren't very old. We'll probably still change them because they're pretty stiff. There's a couple metal pipes that we have to put back on there and get them hooked up. And we'll get going on the other side. See how the injection pump goes. So, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.